Hello, Ed.
Hello.
And I'm just checking to see if Kristen is in the waiting room so that we can test mics and cameras before we let everybody else in.
Yeah, she had emailed me about 5 minutes ago and said she was in there. Hopefully she's got the right Zoom and not the program.
Would her login name be KBUHLS?
Yeah, K Buells. Mm-hmm.
Okay, then I will admit her. It's different when. Yeah.
That's the university not allowing you to change your logins when you change your name.
I totally understand that. Hi, Kirsten.
Hi.
Hello. Was just checking. I said, I'm going to let you two in to make sure your cameras work and the sound works and everything before we let the rest of our participants join us. And that's
I'm sorry, what's your name?
My name is Amy, and I work with youth development, the 4-H youth development program out of Minnesota. And so I am a rep on the PILD committee from National 4-H, the National Association of 4-H Youth Development.
Well, we are both A&R agents here in Virginia. And I'm going to change my name here for a second. Let's see here. Rename. Is there a way, Amy, to view our notes pages while we are presenting?
I believe that if you
Kirsten,
share,
we can do it the way we did the recording if you want.
Okay.
Or I'll run the PowerPoint and you can have your notes up on your screen.
If that works for Amy, sure.
Yeah, that works for me. Otherwise, if you wanted to email me something and I share it on my screen, then both of you would be able to, because then everybody would be seeing the PowerPoint if I share my screen. That gets to be the tricky thing.
Ed and I practiced one time, so I think we're good.
Okay.
How's that sound?
Sounds good to me on my end.
Okay. So Ed, can you download or use the most recent version that's in the Google Doc?
Yeah, I just downloaded it about 10 minutes ago. It's all ready to go.
Okay, good. How many people are you expecting, Amy?
That I do not know. I know that there are 6 in the waiting room at this time. Yesterday, there were, on our large sessions, there were 308, I believe I heard the numbers. So there's quite a few large attendees. With this, they had 6 opportunities to attend. So I'm not sure how many we will end up with today, but. Now we're at 7.
All right, so Amy, did you need to make me a co-host so I can share?
You are right. So my only option is to make host. So I don't know if that takes it away from me. If that is the case, I don't know, because co-host is not an option. So it did. So I'd rather have that so that you're able to present.
Yeah, I'll get back to you.
Either that or you can advance slides and we can just ask you to do so.
Well, I'll just try real quick to share my screen and see what it does.
Looks good to me.
Yep, looks good on my end as well.
All right.
Does it look like you can make anybody else a co-host, or is just host showing up as the only option?
I mean,
it's not necessary for me.
Okay.
Back to you. The only thing I can do if I go to Kirsten's name is, I can pin her image, but it doesn't give me any other options. But that's all that matters, is that I can share.
Yeah, so I'll just make sure if people are if they're unmuted or things like that to watch.
All right, Kirsten, do you want to talk to Amy about how you wanted to do Q&A at the end?
Well, if we have time, Amy, I was hoping that we could unmute everybody and just allow them to share some of their ideas about how they have had successful interactions with legislators and stakeholders in their programs. If anybody's interested in doing so.
Yeah, I can certainly, I'll maybe pose that question at the beginning too. Just to
I
keep-
think Ed and I are both willing to stay on, afterwards. Is that right, Ed?
Yes. I brought my lunch, so I'm good to go.
I didn't.
And Kirsten, you said it had successful conversations with legislators, and what was the other?
I just wanted to invite, during the presentation, we're going to be talking about different ways in which people can communicate with legislators and stakeholders. And I was just hoping that that as we go through this thing, that we will spur individuals to want to share effective times when they've been effective, tools that they've used to be effective. Any other thoughts, Ed?
No, that's good. So Kirsten, do you have your notes up on your screen?
I do, thank you.
Okay, because I was doing a good job, I think, when we did our recording of practice. I could see when you were clicking your slide to go to your next one, and then I was able to kind of move that along. So
I did have a question. I did have a question, Ed, at slide number. Presentation planner on slide number 9.
One, two,
I think I'm doing that
3,
one.
4, 5.
It has a black box.
6, 7, 8, 9.
That's mine, right?
Title. That's a title. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. This one?
No. Uh-oh. We're not on using different versions. Go back to the first slide.
Oh,
Oh,
hold on a second. I just downloaded it. Oh, they moved around?
not really, no.
Because this wasn't here.
Yes, it was.
Because then that was supposed to be my slide. And then that wasn't in that order.
What do you, slide 3, slide 4, that's what I've got.
Yeah, but that wasn't in that order when we did it before. Did you make changes to the presentation?
I haven't changed the order of slides since you and I practiced. I don't think.
Did I lose? Oh, I'm sorry. My bad. My notes are printed front and back. Okay. I thought they were just on front page.
Okay.
Okay. Who is your audience? Then that box.
Slide number 9 is the black box.
slide number 9. Okay.
Yep, yep. That's mine,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, you're let's
No,
just says first.
I just kind of edited a few notes on mine, on my version. That's all.
Okay. All right.
We're good.
Yeah, sorry about that. I had thought normally I print things off one-sided and just have scratch paper on the back, and I didn't that time. Okay. Let me restart this, and then we got 2 minutes too. I guess you probably want to start letting people in, right?
Yes, and I was going to ask, do you want me to give you a courteous 5-minute warning at the end of our time, just to be time conscious?
Sure.
Okay.
Well, we've got our clocks right here too. And you want a hard and fast stop for everybody, official stop at 12, unless somebody wants to stay on.
Yeah, we can offer that. I just want to be conscious of time. So we'll say that at the beginning as well. But I will start letting, we have 27 participants in our room right now, so I will start letting them in. We have a few more joining us from the waiting room when we hit admit all, so we will get started as soon as I have the last 3 in here. And welcome, welcome. Hope your Tuesday is off to a fantastic start. All right, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's session. My name is Amy Wadding, and I am a 4-H youth development educator in Minnesota. And I am serving on the, yes, good morning, on the PIL Planning Committee. And so I am your room host today. And so if anything should arise, please let me know via chat option. And today's session is communication skills for extension educators leading the message. And today's session will be presented by Kirsten Conrad and Ed Olson, both from Virginia. You can see their information on the beginning slide here. So without further ado, we will turn the time over to them. And I want to make a note that at the end, they would prefer to have a question and answer time. And so if you are able to kind of take notes, keep notes, stick them in the chat box for later, they would appreciate that. And they would like to know if you would be able to share successful conversations, communications with legislators and stakeholders. So Kirsten and Ed, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Amy. Appreciate being here today. Hello, everybody. I'm Kirsten Conrad. On behalf of my co-presenter, Ed Olson, we would like to extend a warm welcome from the Commonwealth of Virginia to you on today's presentation on communication skills for extension educators, as well as to those of you who might be viewing this recorded at a later date. This presentation is being made to you today to share some experiences and some tools and tips and tricks to help you make your messages heard across a variety of platforms that are available to us today, from snail mail to email, from classroom presentations to social media. Our voices, our extension voices need to be heard. We are our land-grant university's front lines. We are the boots on the ground, all of us. Who knows more about what we do and what our constituents want and need? This presentation will help you to communicate effectively with stakeholders and other legislators and use a variety of platforms to work closely with your partners, your clientele, your volunteers, and your elected representatives. Ed?
Thank you, Kirsten. All right, so we're going to start off with a presentation planner. Where do you start in your presentation, or where do you start in your communication? It's always good to make sure that you're keeping the goals of the presentation, what you want to accomplish in mind. Take some time to gather the information and organize it. Create an outline, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a couple slides. That will help you keep your information concise and make sure that you stay on topic and on point. Make sure you analyze your slides or your presentation for relevancy. Is it relevant to your audience? Does it have value to your audience? Not necessarily talking about it being accurate. It was probably good, accurate information because you've done that in the previous step, but make sure that it's relevant for your audience. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a slide or two. If you're providing some documentation, make sure that you select appropriate supporting documentation that, again, helps add relevancy to your topic and what you're trying to do. Again, your goals in mind. And then tweak it. If you're like me, your work is never done the first time. Revisions and tweaking are always great to do in any type of presentation that you do, whether it's a short in-person presentation, a letter, or a PowerPoint, or even a Zoom. And then be prepared for contingencies, especially in the virtual world today. Make sure that you are prepared for how things may go awry. So for this presentation, we've already done this and it's been recorded. You are watching us live today, but we'd have, there is a contingency that there is a recorded presentation in case something happens to the technology, that the host can then pull up a recording of this presentation. But also be prepared in those in-person meetings. What are your contingencies? Do you have speaker notes ready for you when you're getting ready to go, or just at least pictures of your slides that you can refer to in case that technology doesn't work? Do you have, if you're going to go meet somebody in person, do you have note cards just to keep you on track? Or I've seen a lot of people, television reporters now using their cell phones, with their note feature in doing reports. Do you have that technology available to you if you don't have note cards? But make sure you're prepared for your contingencies. First, you need to know who your audience is. May sound simple, but it is a very important part of any presentation, so that you can make sure that you are providing the relevant information to that audience. So who is your audience and who are they? Do you have specific demographics that you need to hit? Is it going to be a large group, which may mean your presentation is going to be more maybe lecture based, or is it a smaller group that allows you to have some more interaction? So today I actually was asked to do a program for a garden day, a garden event for Earth Day next Friday. And the organizer had sent me an email, and the topic was going to be Garden Day. And so I reached out to them to find out who specifically was my audience going to be for that program. Were there going to be kids in attendance? What type of program were they expecting me to do? What topic were they expecting me to do? Or is it just up to me? Turns out that I'm going to be speaking, having the opportunity to talk to a lot of state employees. And I know that there is going to be a large contingency of agriculture employees there, because the agriculture building is right next to where this program is going to be. And then also, my audience is very diverse. It's also going to include a lot of garden club members. It's Garden Week here in Virginia next week. And so this is part of that larger program. So there's going to be a lot of people that are already fairly knowledgeable about my topic, which I found out was on pollinators. They specifically wanted me to talk about pollinators. So knowing your audience helps you make sure that you can get that relevant message to them. Also, what has your organizer promised attendees about your presentation? Sometimes things are lost in translation or lost between emails, or there's multiple people involved. Make sure that what is on the final program is what you're going to be presenting on. So check that description of your program. And then lastly, what is your goal for your presentation? Is it just to inform somebody? Are you trying to influence them? Are you trying to change their behavior or motivate them? So for my program that I'm doing for Earth Day, I'm going to be doing several of those topics right there. I'm going to try to inform them about the importance and relevance of native bees And I'm going to try to influence them to plant native plants to help encourage that relationship with native bees. And that may be a change in behavior from them to go and plant something that they normally would not have looked for. So I've got many things in my presentation that I'm going to be doing. So just make sure that you are aware of what you're trying to do so that you can make sure, again, that you're being relevant to your audience.
Part of knowing your audience is knowing what their value systems are that inform their positions. Knowing this will be essential to communicating your message. And it's important to know a little bit more about the differences between what maybe you might think is important and what they think is important. Both Ed and I are A&R agents in urban areas. But this concept of knowing who your audience is, as Ed mentioned, knowing who your audience is important. Whether it's an ag agent, your message might be different than if it's local legislators, or whether it's master gardeners, or whether it's the public. But this concept is going to resonate with all of you, no matter what your specialties are. And you will have to discern why an issue is important enough for someone to bring it to your attention or to ask you to intervene on their behalf or to make a presentation. People hold ideas and information and process it in very different ways. They're slotted into a worldview that is based on past experience, maybe prejudices, upbringing, and a host of other influences through which they develop their value systems. Someone who is coming to you with a question about how to landscape their yard, who has a stronger aesthetic value than perhaps ecological values, may only be receptive to a message about the use of native plants if they can be shown how beautiful a native landscape can be. Someone who comes to us with a question about mosquito control may be much more attuned to values that put a high priority on social and recreational needs, as opposed to ethical and economic concerns that the neighbor has about protecting bees from pesticide use. These lists on the slide show some of the different sets of identified value systems that a person might hold. Often there are multiple influences in play for any potential conflict. For example, Native Americans or certain minority populations are going to be very focused on their cultural values and their focus on fulfillment of ethnic or cultural goals. A church that you might be working with to develop a community garden on might be more concerned with ethical, moral, or even religious values pertaining to the use of stewardship of the land, and so on. So there's lots of examples of different ways that people perceive the world. Next slide.
So here are 5 simple rules for a successful presentation. Again, these can be from formal presentations, such as what we are in right now, whether it be an in-person Zoom or an in-person PowerPoint presentation, to the very simple, the elevator speech of what you want to get across to somebody in that 30 seconds. So make sure you know your subject. Be very knowledgeable about your topic, and that was one of our points in our earlier slide, as well as knowing your audience so that you are able to make sure that you're giving them the relevant information. You need to believe in your message as well as your subject. If you don't believe in it, then you're going to have a hard time getting that across to whoever it is that your audience is. So make sure you believe in your message and believe in your subject. And part of that goes back to knowing your subject. Make sure you practice your presentation. Again, if it's a 30-minute, 60-minute presentation, you want to run through it and practice it. If it's an elevator speech, you want to practice it to make sure that you've got that 30 seconds down, or that you are getting your point across and aren't leaving things very ambiguous. And then practice it again. And make sure you are timing it so that it hits the marks that you were promised, or again, for like that elevator speech, that 30 seconds, so that you can get that information in and move on to the next legislature. So make sure when you are developing your concept or idea that you are using an outline to build that frame. When it comes to electronic presentations, kind of go back a little bit to your high school English class. Remember when you had to do a presentation on index cards? So you want to make sure that you are kind of keeping that concept the same here. No more than one idea or concept per slide. And then no more than 5 bullet points per slide. more than that, and it's going to make it very hard for people to follow. And then make sure that you're giving some timing to your slides. You don't want to spend too much time on one slide typically. So you want to give maybe 1 to 2 ideas per minute to move your slide along. Obviously, some topics you're going to present a little bit more on, and others you're going to maybe not cover as in depth, depending on your audience.
Another good way to think of this, or another different way, a method to use for organizing your ideas and thoughts for presentations, is something that I call the 3-5-3 method. It can be developed to use for a in-person class. It can be developed to use for an online class. It can even be used for an in-person session. Say, for example, I want to make a presentation to one of my stakeholder funding sources. And my broad idea is, we would like you to have a stake in providing financial support for a new initiative like developing a community garden where there has not been one before. My opening is going to explain what I'm asking for, why I think it's a good idea for the community, and why they should think it's a good idea for the community, and the statement of my ask. What am I actually asking for? Okay. The body section is going to have 3 to 5 ideas about not why I think it's important. This will expound on what I think the funding agency is going to get out of it. 3 to 5 ideas about what the shared values are that we talked about earlier. For example, then the summary is a reiteration of the benefits to the stakeholders, the benefits to the community, and a strong reiteration of what we are asking for, what I'm asking for. I want to keep it clear. I want to keep it succinct. I want to keep it's simple enough that the concept was not lost in the weeds. Supporting the documentation, your message with documentation afterwards, and leaving a written plan or other documents with the audience is a really good way to extend your message and leave something behind that enforces what you're trying to say. Of course, you will want to follow up afterwards, of course, to see if there are other questions, and of course to thank them verbally for their time. While you probably recognize these tips for verbal presentations, so much of our communication these days is not in person though. Even the phone seems to have taken a step back in favor of virtual conference and email communications. These tips are useful to keep in mind whether you are delivering in person or on a Zoom connection. As Ed said earlier, speak with conviction. If you don't believe your message or the significance of it, maybe somebody else should be giving it. Put your level of interest and perhaps even passion will hold the listener's attention. Be confident. You're coming to them with facts and figures and personal experiences to share. Own them. Own those experiences. Own your own knowledge and your expertise. And you will be able to convey your message with authority. Practice your delivery. Ed already talked about practicing the delivery. That's helpful no matter whether you are speaking in person or online or on Zoom, or no matter what your audience is. Ask someone to critique the volume and the eye contact that you are given, also while making a presentation. If you speak with low volume or with a hesitant presentation, you will not be able to hold an audience's interest for long. Practice the projection of your voice. And for those uncertain of their style or skills, you can get valuable advice from Toastmasters, or you might hire a coach, someone who's had training in singing, or your local Marine drill sergeant has skills that most of us can learn from. Finally, listen to your professional orators and how they vary not only the tonality and the pitch of their speech, but also how they convey information and how they use rhythm, repetition, and alliteration to hold the listener's attention. A good presenter really needs also to be a good listener. Listen to your audience, get the verbal and the nonverbal cues from questions, from behavior you might see in virtual presentations. If the format allows for it, take some time to allow questions or answer the chat messages. Make sure you as a presenter understand what the questioner is actually getting from your presentation. Just as people have different values that they bring to a meeting, you should also be aware that people have different ways of learning from you and different learning styles. Using as many of these different styles as possible in your presentation will help to not only reach as many people as possible, but also reinforce your message by delivering it in multiple ways. People who prefer, for example, kinesthetic or experiential learning, or those who prefer hands-on learning by doing, they're going to want to experience doing a SOAR test rather than just hearing about how to do one. Auditory learners are the default audience that we most generally cater to. It's also a little bit lazy to only cater to that type of learner. It's far easier, though, to tell someone something without creating a lot of other side effects. Educational research, however, tells us that visual learners are the largest group with a preferred learning format. And it may be preferred because of various reasons. It might be preferred because of difficulty of processing spoken words, hearing difficulties. Online telephone sound distortions are infamous. Zoom problems with connections are also quite common. The simple ability to watch facial expressions and to receive visual cues from a presenter's style certainly enhances learning for some people. Finally, some learners prefer to learn by reading, and some presenters do their best by providing written notes and handouts to audiences who are receiving a primarily visual or auditory online experience. In a Zoom presentation, the careful use of limited text and skillful use of photos can enhance the understanding of your message, but they can also be a distraction. If you're making a presentation in person, it's often bolstered by giving an outline or a material, some kind of written material up front for an audience to follow along with. But be aware that providing printed notes, as maybe some of you already know, to a class or a large audience ahead of time can also work against you by being a distraction from your presentation. The reality is that hearing is enhanced by seeing, which in turn is enhanced by doing. Telling someone how to make a peanut butter sandwich is just not as good as showing them, and that is not as good as getting them to do it themselves.
Are you going to be using PowerPoint for your presentation? Here are some tips that we have for you for PowerPoint or electronic presentations. PowerPoint is a great tool for you in doing a presentation. It helps you to avoid memorizing text or the content. So you can put up a screen image. It could be, a few bullet points. It could be an image, and that's going to be very helpful in helping you to deliver your presentation and not having to memorize it. Make sure you're using presentation notes, and they should just be notes. You don't want really wordy paragraphs that then make it sound like you're just up there reading your presentation, because again, your audience may not be very invested in that. If you present and they think that they could have read it somewhere else, or they could have read it at another time, then they're not going to be as engaged. Use multiple screens if you're doing presentations virtually. Maybe you had gone back to your college years and you had a professor that had two sets of slides, one up on one side, one on the other side. What can you do in a presentation to allow for that in person? Maybe present different slides on one screen than on the other. Or if you're doing things virtually in person, you can share your screen and people can see your PowerPoint, but you can have your notes off on another slide monitor. So that allows you to still be able to use your notes. And that means using your presenter view, which gives you that opportunity to have those notes off to one side of the slide so that you can view them and use them to help you in your presentation. You can also print off your PowerPoint in notes view. And so that is what I have done here. I have my, oops, there we go. It's not in focus, but I have my PowerPoint in notes view. It helped. I find it a lot easier and less distracting for me to look at my notes on a piece of paper than a second computer screen. And again, that's something that you can do in person, again, to have those PowerPoint notes available to you so that you can remember what your topic and talking points are. Another useful thing in a PowerPoint presentation or in-person presentation is use the clock method. The clock method is where you make visual cues around the room, kind of like looking at a clock. So 1 o'clock might be over straight in front of you is the center exit door with an exit sign over the top. And so you're going to remember when you're looking at that number 1 position that you're going to cover slides 1, 2, and 3. Then you can move off to the number 1 on the clock, a little bit over in, maybe the right corner of the room. And that's going to be position number 1. And so you are going to start talking about your talking points that you've memorized or remembered for position number 1. And you can kind of go around that, it's harder to do from 3 to 9. It's a lot easier to do from 9 to 3. And again, that's part of that practicing and getting to know your audience and maybe knowing what that room is going to look like. And that can help you, again, so that you're not memorizing or having to memorize your complete topic, but you have those visual cues to help you get those talking points off. When you're doing a PowerPoint presentation, make sure you are using your branding, trying to get your point across. Sorry about that. With using branding, it adds value to your presentation. So on our presentation here, you can see that we've got our Virginia Cooperative Extension branding that helps add credence and value to my presentation. So make sure that you are using that when you're doing other presentations. It's a lot easier to create a PowerPoint presentation just using the stock slide templates that they have. But again, using branding can help improve your message and make it seem more valuable. So in Virginia, we've got some templates that we can use, and we try to encourage our Master Gardeners to use them also. Again, helping with that branding effort for Virginia Cooperative Extension and Extension in general. Our State Master Gardener office has 3 different templates, and we've got that address up there that you can look at those and see that they've got several different options to choose from, but they're all branded. Our communications department at the university has some branded, just generic Virginia Tech PowerPoint presentations. And again, our library also has some templates and downloads. So make sure you're using the branding to help reinforce that message. If you're doing digital presentations, not only does your content matter, but how you present it matters. So try to avoid using any fonts that are smaller than 24 point. It's too small. It's hard to see that on the screen. Even if you're sitting in the back of the room, it can be, and you've got a larger screen, that can be very difficult to look at. So try to keep your font, it's no smaller than 24. Keep your font consistent through the presentation. This can be very hard for some extension agents because we like to cobble up our presentations together with different slides from different presentations. And so sometimes that font can be distracting then if you're cobbling your presentation together and taking a slide from this one and a slide from that one, and you've got different fonts. So make sure you give yourself some time to go through and get that consistent font. Some of your best fonts to use in PowerPoint presentations are ones that are called sans serif. It means they don't have a serif. They don't have those little fancy things off to the side of them. So some of those best fonts that are available, Calibri, Arial, Comic Sans, Nunito. And so here is an example. The one on the left is sans serif, and we don't have those extra little lines on the letters. So it makes it a lot easier to read. And again, make sure you're using that branding. So for example, in Virginia Cooperative Extension, we have 2 official fonts, Jost and Gothic, and that's what we've used for this presentation is Jost. It continues that branding message that you're trying to get across. Here's some serif fonts, and so you can see the difference from those fonts from the left to the right. And the ones on the left are a lot easier to read and move through. They're a lot less busy. Don't forget your background and contrast in your slides make a difference too. So on the left, we've got that light background with a light font versus a dark background with that light font. So make sure you're being cognizant of your choices in your presentation that help you make your message stand out more. Oh, one more thing I looking down at my notes, I forgot. When we talk about branding, make sure if you your university, your college, or your extension office, extension service has a style guide, that you download it and take a look through it, so that you are again using that branding and helping to perpetuate or helping to get that point across that you guys are experts in your field. Photo use. We've thrown this slide in here. This is something that we've really worked with here in Virginia with our master gardeners, is rules for photo use, especially in this digital age. Make sure you're using large, high resolution images so that when they come across virtually, they are very well pixelated and they're easy to see. Don't use your tiny pictures. Make sure that they're large enough so that they're helping you to convey that message that you're trying to get across. They should be supportive and help enhance the message. You can use borders, but they should be minimal, no more than 1 point, because we don't want to distract from our image. But sometimes a border can help separate that image from the message. The photo images are preferable to clip art. So instead of just using the clip art that's available, make sure you're using photos to help get that message across. Make sure that if it's copyrighted, that you're able to use that image. So don't use watermarked images. I know in Virginia Cooperative Extension, we do have some photo image libraries that are available to us that are not only university or college photos, but they help direct us to some of the USDA websites where we can use copyright-free images. If you're cropping, make sure you're doing it with care so that it comes across and looks good, so that you're not just making a disjointed picture. Don't mess with the original aspect ratio of that photo either. So if you're clicking and trying to make it smaller, keep that aspect ratio the same. What you don't want is to click and drag and then make the images really compressed or really wide. Again, that can be very distracting to your audience and can take away from your message. If you are using pictures of people, make sure that they're looking at the slide content, not away. And any font color against the background color should be of high contrast, but not jarring. So again, going back to that previous slide with photos, you still want to follow that rule. That one on the left was a light background with a light font versus that really jarring one with that red background. So think about that as you're using your pictures too. And then lastly, always give credit to your source. If you even if it's not a copyrighted image, it's always a great idea to give credit to the source. They did provide some work for that image, and so you do want to give them the credit for it. For Zooms, we've got some effective tips and tricks. One is how you sit. Make sure that your camera should be at face level, which you can see, with my camera here, I'm at face level. It's not looking up at me completely, and it's not looking down at me. And make sure that you're sitting up straight. Just as when you're giving a presentation in person, you want to stand up straight to command that attention for the room. Make sure that when you're giving a virtual presentation, you're sitting up straight and that you're not slouching, because that could take away and distract from your message. Be aware of your speech habits. In virtual presentations, you probably need to speak a little bit slower than you may even need to do in an in-person program. So again, practice and have some people on for a practice session so that you can find out if you need to slow your speech down even more. Avoid those background noises. Be in a quiet place. We've seen all those videos where pets and children have run into rooms. But again, you're trying to give a presentation and you're trying to get your message across. And so you don't want to have that added distraction. So in this instance where I'm in the office, and so I've closed my door, I've turned my phone off on my handset, I've closed all the apps on my computer, my email is shut down, my cell phone is turned off, or it's actually in airplane mode so that I can look at the clock, but I know that I'm not going to be getting any calls or text. So avoid those background noises. And then make sure that you're smiling. Research has shown that even if you're on a phone call and you're smiling, people can perceive that smile. So in your virtual presentations, even if your video feed is not on, make sure you're smiling so that your message is more effective and is carried across better. For lighting, make sure you're well lit. Be aware of backlighting. Having a window behind you can be very distracting. Can cause a shadow on your face. So make sure you're well lit. Make sure your audience can hear you. Use a microphone or headset that works well for you. Again, practicing. In this case, you can see Kirsten and I both have headsets on. We found that our voices do better than with the headsets than if we had that external microphone on our computer. So check that out and make sure you're using the appropriate technology. Use of a background. So you can, in virtual presentations, you get to choose the background. And again, you want to try to make sure that it's not distracting. Could also be reinforcing your branding message. So in my case, in Kirsten's case, we both have blurred our background. So it's not distracting. You're not seeing what is behind me that could be distracting to you. My computer doesn't allow me to do a really good job with virtual backgrounds, so I haven't put that, but we do have branded virtual backgrounds that we could use that are Virginia Cooperative Extension or Virginia Tech related. But again, you want to be not distracting. I've used a virtual background at home that is very timely right now. We've got some pictures of Hokie colored tulips, orange and maroon tulips on campus. And it's a really nice background, but I don't think it would be very good for a professional presentation because it can be very distracting. It's large, light brown, very bright colors behind you. And then, as I mentioned before about making sure that you've closed other applications. Again, not only so that you don't hear necessarily a ding of a program going on, but that it's not distracting to you when you're doing your presentation. Make sure you have a backup plan for your presentation. So as we've mentioned, our backup plan was that we did a recording of this. And so it's available for our presenters to use in case there were some technology problems that either of us had today. Make sure maybe you've got printed copies off of your presentation and your speaker notes. What happens if you aren't able to slide share and you just need to speak off the cuff? So you make sure you've got that printed copy of that presentation that you can give the presentation. Also, or maybe make sure that if you don't have a recording of it, maybe the host or has a copy of your presentation so that they could advance the slides for you if you're having some technology issues on your side. And if your microphone isn't working with most of the virtual formats, you can dial in by phone so that you can connect using your phone, whether it's an office landline or if it's your cell phone. And lastly, we find this happens a lot for us here in Virginia because our rural areas don't have great connections. If you are having some problems with your internet, turn off your videos so that that allows your screen sharing to not be as disrupted because you're using so much bandwidth for your video. Kirsten, you're on mute.
I have
Oh,
to
I'm
tell
sorry.
you
Nope,
also
that's me. That is me.
me.
I turned the page too quickly. Sorry about Kirsten.
But I can tell a bad joke if you want.
Oh, Kirsten. So again, for your presentations, use share stories. So we've mentioned in our presentation today, we've shared some personal stories, some examples that relate to our presentation that help reinforce that story. Make sure that you tell jokes. That's a great way to break up the presentation. But again, make sure they're not offensive jokes to help so that you're not offending your audience. You can also break up your presentation by asking questions. That could be very effective. That maybe helpful for you moving from slide to slide so that you know how in depth you need to be. You could do a quick poll, or it could just be looking at the Q&A, or it could be just asking folks to raise their digital hand in the presentation. And then if you are doing a question and answer session, explain up front how participants can ask questions so that things are not disrupted while you're giving your presentation. Just as we did today, we told you that we would do a question and answer at the end of our program. That allowed you then to make sure that you had your questions and they were ready for the end of the program, and that we just didn't, we were kind of tight on time in our program, and we didn't want to run short by answering questions in the middle of the presentation. And then if you are doing a Zoom presentation, sometimes it's very helpful if you are using the Q&A feature, that you have a host read the questions aloud. One, so that they can be recorded if you are recording your presentation, so they get that recorded question. But also it helps so that the focus for the presenter is on answering the question, and not that while they're trying to answer the question, they're also trying to scroll through the chat or the Q&A to find the next question and maybe thinking ahead. All right, now on to Kirsten. And you got a joke for us?
No, I was just going to say that I love using personal examples when I give classes and when I communicate, and it can get distracting if I'm not careful. I will sometimes carry on a bit. But speaking of which, before we move on, I want to invite you all to share in the chat box any tactics that you have used to be successful, to particularly resonated with the audience, or conversely, maybe some challenges. If you'd like to briefly share some challenges that you're facing that you need some ideas on about how to handle them. The PIRD conference that's put on by the Joint Council of Extension Professionals is all about conveying and learning how to convey our messages. As a member for 3 years on the PIRD committee for the conference planning committee, I can tell you that a whole lot of work, in fact, go into promoting and staging this conference on an annual basis. And I really want to give a big shout out to this year's planning committee for putting this all together. So thank you all for attending this important event. One of our most compelling needs as an extension educator is to present the positions of our state and local governments, our land-grant university employers, our clientele, and yes, even our personal views sometimes to legislators and stakeholders who control the financial well-being of our organizations. Here in Arlington, we are in a bit of a challenge right now with local funding, what is being proposed to be cut by 50%. State funding fine, but local funding is being threatened. And we have marshaled the forces of volunteers and many stakeholders through the process of education to help defend the funding for our organization here. But whether we are training the public on best management practices, if we're supporting budget allocations for extension, we are primarily communicating the value of what we do and how it is that what we do supports our communities, our elected or appointed staff, and of course, officials at every level. If you've been given an opportunity to meet in person with a legislator, make sure you understand their positions on the subjects you plan to discuss. Make an appointment, call ahead of time, and have an agenda prepared. Sometimes it's good to work out that agenda with the staff of your proposed meeting legislator that you're going to meet with. But you need to make sure that you volunteer yourself during that meeting as a local expert. And most importantly, make sure that you verbalize your ask. Why are you there? What is your, what do you hope to achieve by meeting with the legislator, by taking up this person's time? And what do you hope will happen as a result of your ask? What would happen if your proposal came to be? Make sure that you verbalize that and show that you're prepared for the meeting and are prepared also to leave a written summary of your talking points and how you might be contacted afterwards. Next. You got to remember, though, to stick to the facts. And while it may be tempting to do so, don't stretch the truth or exaggerate the situation. And remember to stay focused on your message. Sometimes it can be overwhelming to be in a strange place trying to verbalize an important message. Don't get distracted. Remember that you're also there to learn, so you want to be a good listener. You want to follow up afterwards with a thank you to let them know that you appreciate your time. And of course, it's another opportunity to tell them why you came, why you were there, and again, what your summary was of the situation. So don't be afraid to hammer home the message that you're making. Next, please. But keep it simple, okay? What is this expression? Keep it simple, sister, right? Keeping it simple can be powerful and convincing. Nobody has enough time for everything that we have to do, especially an extension agent, right? And especially these legislators have many demands on their time, and you need to keep it simple and convincing by focusing on your audience's values and expectations. Stick to the points that you're prepared to answer. Don't bring up subjects that you don't know about, and keep your audience focused on the 5 W's, okay? The who, the what, the where, the when, and the why you're there are going to be very important comments that you need to get across, concepts to get across. It's good to maintain the focus on the idea and why you and your audience want to achieve the same things. What's the expression? I'll have what he's having. Works at the bar, but can also be used as a mentor aid to practice your presentations. You want what he wants. You want what she wants. Why and how are you going to get your audience to understand and buy into your message? Okay, it's a very important, excellent marketing and promotional departments that at your land-grant universities that Ed talked about, and that are available through extension, that are eager to help you polish your message with printed materials, brochures, PowerPoint templates, and even statistics that will help support your presentation. So don't be afraid to ask. Contact your district director, contact even your state director and the marketing department for extension, and ask what the facts are and the statistics that support your messages. Next. If you are going to be writing a letter, you need to be very straightforward and clear on your wording. Don't assume that a member of Congress understands what you do. Always address the who and the what and the why you are writing in the first paragraph of the letter, and reiterate the what in your closing paragraph as well. You need to use the facts to back up your opinions, okay? Even though it's best to keep the letter itself to one page, it's fine to attach supporting materials when necessary. Here's the facts. Here's what happened at the local level. Here's a document. Here's an article. Use your credentials also to establish your expertise without boasting. Okay, show the article. Show the ways in which you have interacted with local officials. Show the excellent work you're doing with your volunteers and your stakeholders. And don't be confrontational. Even when you have reason to believe that the official may hold a different view than your own, you need to not get into it and down the weeds that way. If you're sending a letter through the mail, you need to also be aware that it can take extra time for that letter to be processed by security. Never mind the delivery problems that are going on right now. It has to go through a security process before it's delivered to a congressional office. And if time is critical, it's probably better to send the letter by email. Again, there's nothing to be gained by making your audience feel defensive. Your class, your legislator that you're speaking to is doing you a big favor by giving their time to hear your message. I once had delivered a 3-hour class on landscape management practices. And afterwards, a woman came up to me from the audience and said, "Thank you. That was well worth my time." And I was a new extension agent at the time, and I thought it kind of blew over my head. And it wasn't until afterwards that I realized precisely what she was saying. I did not waste her time. I gave her information she could use, and she considered the time that she spent in this long class to be valuable. We want our legislators, our stakeholders, to come away from a meeting with you to feel exactly the same way. It was well worth their time to meet with you. You don't have to apologize for taking the time. You do need to keep it as positive and polite as possible. Finally, your legislator or your business stakeholder or CEO is human also. You have asked and been given an opportunity to particularly see this one person. Don't blow it by treating him as just one of many, somebody else, okay? As good as anybody else. Make sure that you verbalize your appreciation for their time as well as the significance of their position to your message. We all like to be thought of as being important. Social media can also be a tool for conveying ideas and information and conversing with representatives. It is used by most members of Congress to push out information to constituents. And interestingly, Twitter and Facebook are the social media platforms that I understand are most commonly used by members of Congress to interact with constituents. There's a very public nature to these types of media, and conversing with them is going to result in a very instantaneous, sometimes a more rapid response. But it's very, very useful for saying thank you. And adding a link to an event that may have taken place. A photo always gets personal attention. And of course, you need to also be aware that sometimes even a positive post can elicit negative responses from people who have an axe to grind. And so sometimes for that reason, legislators limit their social media, limit the ability of people to post on their social media pages. But certainly including a photo will increase attention, interaction, and positivity sometimes. And if you are able to post, you need to make sure that you limit it to 1 to 2 sentences. And again, add a link to additional material if somebody wants to read more or see more information about a particular event. Next, please. So, back before COVID, before times, we were all meeting with legislators in person this week. And it was an interesting experience when I did it. And when I have continued to do it, it's been always a very positive experience. I can't say enough nice things about the value of doing that. And Ed, did you want to say something with this slide?
If you want to continue on, you're more than welcome to.
Okay, all right. So you want to blow your horn, okay? You've met with the legislators, you've promoted yourself, your position, you've presented your position. Now, what are you going to do? You need to build public support, okay? Build public support. You have, hopefully your visit to your legislator is only part of the process of building support for a particular position. In my case, our budget, educational session about our budget, extension budget, involves both meeting in person, but also conveying to the public and our stakeholders like volunteers, the talking points that they can use to build public support amongst our residents. If you can, regularly attend your local government meetings. You can get updates on the needs and accomplishments of local government and other stakeholders. You can also give updates on your accomplishments. You can educate public policy decision makers about budget matters and about other kinds of issues that are important to extension. And many times, these meetings are reported on by local news, TV or news website, and it's a really great way to get some face time for extension in your local news media. You can have a media strategy as well that's done throughout your whole office, as well as in conjunction with your district office. That you can submit press releases, you can write a letter to the editor, you can make sure to send your members of Congress a copy of your messages and work with other stakeholders and community-based groups to support extension.
Make sure that you also are building coalitions with other like-minded groups that can help make your message be bigger by bringing in those other like-minded groups. As Kirsten mentioned, in your office, make sure you've got designated 1 or 2 primary people to answer any media inquiries or provide quotes. If you're in a smaller office, it's probably not that difficult, but if you're in a larger office, Kirsten and I are both in larger urban offices, making sure that people know in your office where to forward those calls for those topics can help make sure that you're getting the right message across. And then when something good happens, let people know. Are you involved in a federal grant? Invite your legislators for a presentation that you're doing to highlight the research or whatever activity it is that you've done, so they can see where those dollars that are in the budget are, how they are being impactful. And if you did request some legislation to be enacted, make sure you send a letter to the local paper to publicly thank your official that you lobbied with and met with or wrote letters to, so that they know that you were still invested in the ask that you went for.
So we hope that we've given you some new ideas, or maybe have encouraged you to reach out to your local legislators and stakeholders to give them some information if you haven't done it in a while. What are your experiences in selling your ideas to financial sponsors, selling programs to your volunteers? I find that to be a challenge sometimes too, you know. Hey, I got a new idea. Come on, somebody run with it. So that's sometimes a tough sell. You need to educate your legislators about the return on the investment that extension provides in order to show them the value, part of the value that the extension is giving back to the community. It's kind of like getting the kids to clean up their room sometimes, but at any rate, I'd like to remind you that the ability to effect successful communications requires skillful use of an entire toolbox of processes and skills and experience. And the good news is that it can be learned. Acquiring some of these skills, sharing your skills you've already acquired with some of the newbies in extension in your office will make you a more effective extension educator. Now we have about 5 minutes left, and earlier we asked you to put some of your most challenging communication and education challenges into the chat box. So we'd like to open up the floor now and invite you to turn on your microphones if you'd like, and have a little Q&A. Certainly we have been able to enjoy some challenges and some very effective communication events, I suppose, if that's not the right word. For instance, some of the things that we learned during the pandemic have been very, very powerful. We used to do public education classes on a fairly regular 3-4 times a month. And we thought we'd be doing really well if we got 35 people to show up to a community center. Our master gardeners are now doing 300 people at public education classes on a weekly basis. And it's so amazing to see the new changes that have been brought to our public education effort. So I'm going to shut up now and let Ed go on. Our contact information is right there. We'd be happy to send you a copy of the PowerPoint or whatever it is that we can do to help you continue with your journey.
There was a request if there was the ability to put the No Sweat public speaking link into the chat box. I don't know if Kirsten or Ed, if that's something you have available.
I'm not aware of what that is. Are you talking about the notes for today's presentation?
Jackie, if you're on, if you're able to chime in.
That was listed in the PowerPoint. So I didn't get the entire No Sweat link that was in the PowerPoint.
The
So
no
I could,
sweat.
yeah, that was done by Ed. So he had a link to a no sweat presentation.
Ed,
It's a link to a website.
Trying to look back through. I'm not sure which that was. I don't remember talking about something that was like no sweat. All right, let's go. I'll try to Jackie, I'll chat with you in just a second, okay?
There were other things that were shared that were tools that they used for success. It was Jamboard, another app, and I know that Mindy was able to share it later. It's used for work clouds, polls, and many other things. Robin said, I find the audience likes the engagement of polls through the presentation. Mindy suggested great icebreakers and movement breaks or scavenger hunts for household items. They get adults and kids really excited. And Mentimeter was the name of that site that they used or she's used. And Lorna was able to put the No Sweat public speaking link into the chat box.
thank you, Lorna.
Yeah, she was quicker than I am. I just found it, was getting ready to put it in there.
And I know that Kirsten and Ed both had said at the very beginning that they would be able to stick around if anybody needed to stay on a little bit longer. But I just want to formally thank Ed and Kirsten for their wealth of information today and for sharing with us. We appreciate your efforts provided to make us all better. Once you know better, you can do better with your tips and tricks and tools. And so being conscious of time, we have 1 minute left until our time is done. But again, you're welcome to stay on and chat with our presenters today.
Well, thank you, Amy, for your work today. Appreciate that.
Yes, thank you. And thank you to everybody for joining our presentation today.
Yes, so if you have questions, make sure you ask them. Otherwise, be well on your adventures and endeavors.
So Ed, how is your funding in Henrico?
We haven't seen anything being cut because of COVID.
Yeah,
It's been fairly good. The only thing was our second A&R position was officially cut. They were tired of putting the funding in for it and not having the position. So when COVID came and they needed to tighten their budgets up, they cut that funding. And in the next budget, that it's not in the next budget for next fiscal year. So we'll have to revisit that to bring back that position that we've lost 4 years ago.
I think our county board has been so inundated with messages. So they're, they're afraid to cut our budget very much now. Nice to think about, huh?
Yep. All right, well, it looks like we're down to 22 people and no one's popped on. So I guess that's the end then. Our contact information is there if you all need to reach out to us or want to reach out to us. Thank you. Thank you, Amy.
You're welcome. And it's a sign of a job well done. There are a lot of thank you comments in the chat box as well. So if you have a minute to check those out before we sign off.
Great, great, good job.
Yes, have a fantastic rest of your week.
Bye-bye.